as you know, I interview a lot of fascinating people. And when they write a book, I read the book. I don't let a researcher read the book and give me some canned questions. I read the book. And I read this book, Once Life Matters, A New Beginning by Marty Angelo. And I was absolutely fascinated by this man's story. It's a gripper, and he tells it like it was, and he tells it like it is, and he's come here to get to know me, and I'm getting to know him. Welcome, Marty.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
It's great to be
all
back
the way
here.
from sunny Southern California.
Yes, all the way from California, but you know, I had my starts locally in
You were born in 1946 in Buffalo.
In Buffalo, New York. Right.
To a father and mother. Your dad was a doctor, he became a neurosurgeon.
Right.
Happily raised. You loved playing cowboys and Indians. You were just like a normal kid.
Right.
So where did you go off the rails?
That's a good question. You know, I look back on my life now, and I think, you know, where did I go wrong? And I was kind of a religious guy. I believed. I had a lot of God up here in my head, but I never knew Him down in my heart. You know, and so I went off in rebellion. I think in that -- and mad, crazy baby boomer generation that you know, you do your own thing, tune in, and drop out. I was always the guy that would book a band in college, and I also used to book the students for Democratic Society speakers like Jerry Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, and you know, all these big radicals. And we were fighting against the Vietnam War. So you know, I grew up fast in that fast lane. I liked the party life.
Well, you had a party all the time attitude, and as you say in your book, part of the reason was you didn't want to miss anything.
No, I would always be the first one to the party and the last one to leave.
You know, the thing that struck me as I'm reading your book was I mean, you would go sometimes for almost weeks at a time when you were hardly sleeping, when you were high on drugs and alcohol and other kinds of things. I don't know how your body took it. I mean, I'm astonished. You're sitting there across from me. We're about the same age, and you're looking as healthy as you are and doing as well as you are. I mean, was there no physical toll?
Yes, there was. I mean, there was. I had developed what's called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, which is supraventricular tachycardia, where my heart rate would go up to 320 beats a minute. You know, I came close to death many times in the hospital. In fact, I would lie when the nurse would ask me while I'm laying in the emergency room, did you do any stimulants before you came here? And I'd lie facing death, lying, saying, oh no, you know, I might have snorted a gram of cocaine before I got to the hospital in my party. So yeah, I paid a price. I mean, it wasn't easy.
Now
it was off my youth.
With your party all the time attitude and your natural leadership abilities, you really were, and probably still are in many ways, quite entrepreneurial. You were right in on the cutting edge of a lot of things in the music industry. Yes. One of them being the disco craze. You got in on that long before others did, and you actually had your own television show for a time in Buffalo.
Right. Yeah, I started off in Buffalo on a cable station. No one wanted this. This was long before Saturday Night Fever. And so we started off in black and white on a cable station, and then it became so popular on cable. They were still stringing cable back then. And that a local station in Buffalo, Channel 4, network affiliate, decided then that they wanted to be a part. So they gave us the remote truck. And in fact, we used to come up to Canada a lot and audition dancers in Toronto. And I worked at the Club 747, which is where we taped this show. And a lot of the dancers that came in used to come also to that club. In fact, I'm sure a lot of your viewers are former dancers that used to come to the 747. I mean, the Canadians there used to be a line in front of this place from like 8 o'clock in the evening until 2 o'clock in the morning. And mostly Canadians. I mean, they'd spend the whole weekend. They'd come in on a Friday and a Saturday.
Now, what was the format? Like it was called what? Disco 1, 2, 3?
Disco Step by Step.
Step by Step. So were you teaching disco even?
Well, that was the idea. We wanted to teach people in the privacy of their own home how to dance, because they were intimidated. You know, before, you know, coming out of the 60s, it was, you know, we barely made it out alive. And so it was like, you know, in the 70s, like someone opened a window and brought in some air. And so, but no one knew how to really, they started dressing up and started to go out. And so we felt if we could teach these people how to dance in the privacy of their own home, then they could come out to the discos. And that appealed to the advertisers. So we started getting record stores and hair cutting places and wardrobe stores and other discos that would become a part of the commercial part of it. And after a while, you couldn't buy a spot on the show. It became so popular.
Yeah. By the way, I think we have got a few pictures of Marty in that era.
Yeah, that was in the set.
You look, you look like one of the Bee Gees there, Marty. Yeah. And
well, I was a rock and roll promoter in that picture. They're unfair to Buffalo Raven fans. They would know us back. You know, remember, I don't know, a lot of the Canadians would remember Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks.
Sure, sure.
You know, and so we had groups in Buffalo called Stan and the Ravens. So it was always a Ravens against the Hawks. This was back in the 60s, so I managed that band.
Is that another disco set?
That was right on the set at the Club 747. That was inside a jetliner.
Now, you don't look high at the time, but you say in your book most of the time when you were doing this, you were on something. You were on drugs.
Yes.
You were basically abusing substances of various kinds. How did you manage all of the business side of things when you were so high?
Well, I mean, you can function as a functioning alcoholic or a functioning drug addict. It wasn't that I was a junkie. And you know, when you become physically addicted to it, you know, in the music business, everybody I met during those eras of 60s and 70s were on some kind of a drug, or, you know,
yeah,
and so
you mentioned
we function.
That. Yeah, in the book you talk about this.
Right.
For instance, you talk about on one occasion going to I don't know if it was a party or what it was with John Lennon.
Yes.
And people coming and going. He was cutting a new record or something, right?
Yeah, he was back in L.A. after he split up from Yoko Ono.
Yeah, and everybody was high all the time.
All
I'm
the
thinking, how does anybody function? How do you produce anything creative out of that?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But how creative they are
Yeah.
in writing songs like out of the thin air. I mean, I have a hard time playing chopsticks on the piano. I mean, I don't know how some people could be blessed with that artistic ability, and while others, see, I was a frustrated musician, but I loved the lifestyle. So I didn't practice. I could have been in a band. I was in a band, but you know, I wanted to be a part of that scene. So I'd stay up late at night. You know, go out with the girls and drink and party, and hey, actually you can make a living at it. So it's very hard to break out of that.
Now, when you talk about your work with the Ravens, and there was another rock group whose name escapes me that you were with for some time.
The Grassroots.
The Grassroots.
Right, Three Dog Night.
I mean, Three Dog Night. It's a pretty grueling lifestyle. I mean, you're on the bus, off the bus, on the bus, off the bus, unloading equipment, loading equipment, dealing with band members who can't get along, wives of band members who hate each other, dealing with club owners and promoters who are cheating you, patrons who are being more than rude. I mean, what were there times when you thought, "What am I doing here?"
Yes, many times.
Yeah.
You know, but how do I get out? I mean, how do you get out of being paid good money, but knowing that your life is a mess? I mean, you know, I wasn't. I was somewhat happy. I mean, I put on a facade, but deep in my heart, I was as sad as could be. Yeah. And you know, our facades would talk to each other. Oh, how are you? I'm fine. Yeah. How are you? I'm fine. Would you like to do some drugs? But everyone was hurting. You know, we just didn't show it.
Now, you mentioned one time when you spent some time with Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
And one of the first things that he wanted to do before you got to listening to a tape of your band was to get high.
Right.
And he was reputed to be maybe the world's best guitarist.
Right. He had just put out his first album, so he wasn't as popular as he went on to be. Yeah. But he was very, very popular. He just came back from England, and I mean, that's what you did. You smoked pot, listened to records, and you know, I'd get paid for it. I used to work for 100 different record companies that used to pay me to let them know what I thought of their record. They'd pay me $25 a
Yeah, you got paid for listening to music.
Yeah.
Which suited you fine.
Well, you know, get up in the morning and you know, smoke a couple of joints, do a couple of lines of coke, and listen to records all day. Put out your list, send them back, and then I would use them within the disco industry at the time. We would take them and have different disc jockeys from all the different major discos in the country down in the States as part of our organization.
Tell me the Elton John story.
It's funny, I just sent a book to Elton John. This was before he was really popular as Elton John, though he was a songwriter and wrote some good hits. Rod Stewart was coming to Buffalo playing at the Kleinhans Music Hall. And the promoter of it said, listen, whoever would take a guy and book a guy named Elton John, they would make sure that Rod Stewart came to the club afterwards to party. And we had some very not very much success with some of the groups that we had because it was always snowing. Or we had B.B. King and it was a major snowstorm, like 5 people showed up. So we were losing money. And so when they said, well, you know, we'll give you Elton John for $50, and you can have him play it in your club. And I said, Elton? Who? Who would come and see a guy named Elton, number one? And so even though Rod Stewart would come afterwards, we just didn't think it was going to happen. Maybe that would go over in Toronto.